Before we dive in, we'd like to give a shout out to Waltham, Massachusetts, Gardena, California, and Quincy, Washington for all the new Queer Money podcast subscribers who have recently joined us. Thank you.
David,
Yes.
I want to tell you a secret.
A secret about what?
About the uber rich.
John. It's not good to tell secrets about other people.
I know, but we're doing it anyway. And that's why we're here and why you're all listening to Queer Money episode number 516, because today we're giving a behind the green curtain look at the money secrets of the uber rich with the Rainbow Bull podcast host, Tim Volk. Tim is also the founder and principal of Volk Company, a boutique financial advisory firm that specializes in helping wealthy families and their advisors.
Well, as usual, I guess I'm doing what you tell me to do. Now let's get down to business.
Capital One Auto Navigator does more than just auto financing. We're here to help you find a car you love, too. Shop millions of cars from thousands of dealers nationwide. Research your favorite makes and models. Explore dealers near you and more. All on Auto Navigator.
So welcome Tim Volk to the Queer Money podcast.
Yay!
We're
So
excited to have you.
Yeah.
This is probably like the 5th or 6th time that we've had a Zoom call with you, and we decided, let's record this shit.
I know, right? Because it's fun. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
People need to hear the brilliance that comes out of our mouth, and we're just freestyling.
I don't know. I don't.
And
probably
also
gonna
the
get-
garbage.
There's probably millions of people want to hear this. Millions.
We're going to
globally.
do a little bit of gossiping today. And while it might sound like it's rude or your grandmother told you it's not appropriate to gossip, or I think there's a biblical thing about not gossiping, right? There's something in the Bible about it. We're going to do this in such a way that hopefully our listeners and viewers can glean some words of wisdom, some tips that they can apply to their own financial lives and improve their own financial situation.
Sweet.
So we're going to talk about rich bitches.
Mm.
We're talking about ultra high net worth clients of yours. What kind of money are we talking about? Is this like Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates kind of level, or are we talking about like your CDB list kind of celebrity?
Dude, you just picked the richest people in the world. Like that's like the two of them have more wealth than 50% of the population.
But you're like fancy, so I figured maybe you're BFFs.
Oh yeah, we're like this. Jeff Bezos. Not the
I don't
people
know if
I
that's
want to be
something you
with.
want to say out loud these
Well,
days.
Bill Gates, I think, is pretty cool actually, because he does a lot of cool things with his money. He's remarkable, but Jeff Bezos, not so much. I mean, but I think it's interesting.
Wife.
Did you see how they showed up? It's a White House dinner.
Yeah,
It's a state dinner.
yeah, it was a little.
What was that?
I don't know how you have a midlife crisis when you're Jeff Bezos with all that money.
I don't know.
That's what we're
It's like
watching
some
in real
hoochie
time.
mama. He married a hoochie mama. I don't understand that. I just.
Great. Now Amazon's never going to sponsor our show.
Oh yeah, sorry, my bad.
You know what?
She could be perfectly nice, as far as I know.
Right.
Yeah.
She's
It happens, right? We see this with wealthy people, whether you're a man or a woman.
Absolutely.
We're starting to see this trend happen even more with women, that we all want the trophy spouse, right? We want that trophy. And the gay community, oh my God, we've been doing this for longer than anybody.
Unfortunately, David married his trophy spouse 20 years ago.
Yes, I
And he
remind
will
mine.
die with
I
his
say that
trophy
to mine
spouse.
too. I told my first husband, still my first husband. I keep telling him that. The trophy wife.
I married up.
Yes, you did. I think
You did.
All right. So, what kind of money are we talking about here?
Well, okay, there's formal definitions in the world of wealth management. You know, there's affluent people with 100,000 or more. There's high net worth, which are typical $1 million to $3 million or more. And then there's ultra high net worth, which is, it used to be typically defined as people that had 25 or 30 million of liquid capital. And usually that means they have a $50 million net worth or more. And that was the beginning of that definition. And of course, you have the super wealthy that you just identified. But the real way it's defined in the industry is by the complexity of the wealth and what it takes to manage it. You know, if you had $100 million and it's all in bonds, it's not a sophisticated family office client type thing. You don't need a lot of people. But if you have operating interest in the company if you still have multiple family branches and you are in the third generation and you have 40 people in the family that the money supports, then it becomes a lot more complex. And that's how the industry really works, as to what you need to support your lifestyle, and to maintain, protect the wealth and grow it.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
I think so. Does it make sense, David?
Yeah, it does. It was kind of funny when you were kind of describing that picture. I don't know how many folks have watched The Fall of the House of Usher, but it kind of reminded me of that a little bit. Here's this guy who owns a pharmaceutical company and has a bunch of kids from 3 different wives. And they all have their pet project or thing that they're working on, and he's got his hands in all of it and all that money and all that kind of stuff. It kind of reminded me of that, right?
Yeah,
we
right.
we oftentimes think, oh, the ultra wealthy just have more zeros on the end of their accounts than we do, right? Oh, they've got $7 billion sitting in. You're Jeff Bezos. You've got $7 billion sitting in your checking account. Hell no, you don't. It ain't earning nothing. Your movement, you have, the probably 95% of his wealth is tied up in Amazon stock, right? It's just the whole different game when it comes to where your money, or it can be where your money is at. Like you said, some of them maybe, some of them maybe not.
My grandmother used to say things to me like, money is what money does. Everybody has to put their pants on one leg at a time, so don't be impressed with it. So that was kind of the country, the sort of Midwest, Rocky Mountain, understated side of wealth, which is really what I really love and most of the people that have a lot of wealth are like that. That is the majority. It isn't like Succession. None of the people I know in the industry have anybody like Succession as a client. What most people don't know is that nobody's going to feel sorry for a wealthy family. They're just not.
Yeah.
But the complexity and the issues that surround wealth become the bigger problem. That's really the challenge.
Can you describe that complexity a little bit?
Sure. So, I have a technical background in my career, and I'm a CFP. And so the people that manage money, do it really, really well. Like we have a 99% accuracy in estate planning. We transfer money very efficiently. We manage returns. It's easy in some respect because it's black and white. What was your return last year on your money? What was your return on your portfolio? But the issues lie in what I'll call and this is where my clients and my mentors have really pushed my career into, is how do you support the issues that surround wealth? And that becomes the biggest thing, I think, is entitlement. How do you avoid entitlement? How do you avoid raising children that are entitled or grandchildren that are entitled? They had no say in being born into this family. And I think one of the easy things to think about is like, did you guys watch Crazy Rich Asians?
Actually, I have not.
Yeah, we did. We watched that at John and Francine's in the basement. Yeah,
Henry Golding.
Yes.
They're in their Singapore mansion. Remember, he brings his Chinese girlfriend from America who's game theory at Columbia or NYU or something.
Yeah.
And then he's in the childhood home, which is the biggest home in Singapore because his family founded Singapore. And he's in his bedroom because he spilled red wine and he's changing his clothes. His mom comes in and they're talking and he's looking around the room and she's like, if you're looking for those cigars, I threw those out years ago. And it's kind of this funny thing where you start to realize it's his childhood bedroom. And what I want people to think about is he had no say. That's what he grew up in. That is his reality. Just like you grew up in your bedroom, I grew up in my bedroom at home. That's what we think about. But his mom is adjusting his foulard and his collar. And he says, well, Mom, I thought you'd be very happy that the first girl I bring home is Chinese. And she turns and goes, Chinese American, the worst. And you start to realize that all cultures face some of these same issues. And it's really about the fundamental piece of the family, which is the hard part for wealth. How do you get the family to communicate? How do you raise a healthy family that is supporting each other, that helps nurture the rising generations to become self-actualized, to become their own person and do good in the world?
Yeah.
That's crazy, right? I mean, nobody thinks about that, but we think about it. Anybody that's raised kids or mentors. I have a lot of nieces and nephews, and I've mentored a lot of young gay people that, you have to have a mentor. You have to have people say, this is what you got to do.
Yeah.
But when the wealth is involved and the transfer of wealth already starts, it becomes a real problem.
Okay, that's great insight. So when you think about your clients, the ultra high net worth clients, and their families, and you think about the LGBTQ plus community and our families, what similarities and differences, if any, do you see?
Well, in our community, many people know that gay men have more money than gay women typically, or lesbians, right? The community has its own economic divide, and that's just the power of male versus female in the earning power. But it also is compounded in the gay community that most gay people don't have kids, right? So we don't have the normal cost of raising the family and what it goes to that. And so that accumulates over time. And, we can put more money away. We can put more money into our 401ks. You can actually earn that where you're not having the expense of daycare, schooling, stuff like that. But I don't think that, and so many of the people that were my generation were worried about talking about being gay. So everything we did was accelerate everything around us, the way we dress, the way we look, how our bodies are funnier, smarter, more accelerated in our careers because we didn't want to talk about that one thing about being gay. So we tried to get everybody to like us better for all these other reasons. So you met a lot of people that accelerated in their careers and did very well, both male and female, by the way. I know a lot of women that have done very, very well in their career too. But I think that's sort of a fundamental difference. Still have nieces and nephews. We still support the families, but it's you don't have that gap of this constant drain.
Right. With no fees or minimums and no overdraft fees, banking with Capital One is the easiest decision in the history of decisions. That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com/bank for details. Capital One, N.A., member FDIC. So I think it was the 2012 and 2017 Prudential LGBT financial experience surveys that we've always talked about how gay men especially, but more so it seems that lesbian women, lesbian couples are starting to creep up in their earning power. We've always understood that to be somewhat factual, but I think wasn't it the Prudential studies that kind of highlighted that despite that slightly more higher income that we're not, and the fact that we don't have as many children, we're not necessarily saving more. Have you experienced that in the community?
Well, typically my clients are high net worth or ultra high net worth, but I do have people that I help that are what I would call the emerging affluent, they're on their path. So I think in America in general, we have people that are not saving. They're just not disciplined in how they're spending. They don't care about how they spend money going out or doing other things. I think the gay community is, I think we all are on the same page with that there's a little more critical nature and that we're not thinking about our financial security long term as we should be. So I don't think that's an unusual thing in the country right now, but I think it's probably highlighted more in the gay community just because of the ability to go out and have fun.
Right.
The access to it.
And I think that, we're kind of separating the groups out here, right? You work with people who either they themselves or their family has created a lot of wealth. So it's not necessarily, I think for the everyday people like John and me, and maybe even you, those are the things that the issues that we're thinking about and dealing with. Are we saving enough money for retirement? Are we putting enough money aside for emergencies? Those kind of things. Those are not necessarily the kind of the top of mind when it comes to money issues that these individuals are dealing with. And maybe that's bring it back to that. Are you finding that most of the people that you work with are, I don't want to necessarily say that they are the Zuckerbergs or Bezos or
no, they're not.
But most of the people you work with, are they people who that's where their wealth came from? They started a business that grew into something that was worth tens of millions of dollars or maybe even hundreds of millions of dollars, but their portion of it is tens of millions of dollars.
Yes, that's a typical scenario where there's operating interests in a company, whether the families retain the company or had a monetization event where they sold the company, and then they have to manage the capital that they had from the company. Some people have they're good at that. A lot of families are struggling that they have this, best in class operating company, and then they sell it and they have to manage capital. It's a very different animal. and hence the need for what we call in the industry a family office, which is a business entity that does nothing but support and run the money for the family. It's really the business of the family, not the family business. And that's the difference.
Right.
But, they still face other critical issues like cash flow. When we look at really wealthy families, we look at a few things before. If you want me to go into that, I can sort of say, we look at liquidity, you look at asset location and asset diversification. Oh, look, I got a thumbs up.
It's still
I
right
did
on.
that. Right on. So I didn't have a thumbs up. That's so cool. It's my eyes.
It just likes what you're saying.
And so, and then we look at the asset allocation, and we look at all, but taxes are a big issue, how you structure things, estate planning, how you transfer wealth. But families are also really, really good at transferring risk. That is probably one of the fundamental things about wealthy families is they learn how to access and mitigate risk. We all need to learn that. And that's something I think is one of the more important things to learn.
Can you elaborate on that more? What does that mean exactly when you say risk, and how do you mitigate that?
The easiest way to think about risk for the rest of us is, we buy car insurance because if I wreck our car, we want somebody else to pay for it. That is a transfer of risk. If we buy insurance on the business, the same thing. We buy life insurance is the easiest way to transfer. It's also one of the most cost-effective ways to transfer risk. You can also transfer risk by changing the entity or where it sits in your portfolio, if it's in a trust versus if it's in your personal name or if it's in an LLC. So there's different ways to do that. And that's sort of structural stuff, kind of boring, but important.
You think that to a degree, our community should emulate that in some way?
Yeah. Yeah, and you and I, we were talking about it a little bit ago. One of the biggest one of the
Easy for you to say.
Wow, he's so articulate. What a gift. One of the things that I get really focused on is how we're going to take care of ourselves as we get older. And I was fortunate enough to have all my grandparents. I had my great-grandparents, and when I was little, I had my great-great-grandparents. So I watched the decline as we age. And so one of the things I've learned in the last year or so with my podcast was that there's very few nursing homes or assisted care facilities that take gay people, openly gay people, let alone a couple. That's a problem for us. So how are we going to take care of ourselves? And when I talk about long-term care coverage, which is one of the challenges I think we have, the insurance companies decided to create this ability on life insurance to buy long-term care riders. So you have a life insurance policy that has cash value, cash buildup. It gives you access to the S&P 500 for the investment side. It gives you a floor of 0, so it won't go below 0. It gives you a guaranteed return after 20 years of the premium. It has all these really cool features. But most important is the death benefits. So if you buy $1 million policy and we have long-term care needs, and it can be not just once in our life, it can be at different times in our life, you can draw cash out of the death benefit early. So you're allowed to draw $12,755 a month.
Oh, wow.
Which is what it usually costs right now to go into assisted care, something, or have a nurse come in. I think we're just going to have people come in. And I'm thinking we should have cute male.
Sign me up.
Right? I mean, I don't think it's going to be a bad thing if we select our caregivers versus if we had
there should be an
kids
app for that. You can swipe left and swipe right for the cutest.
Exactly.
male
Maybe that's our next
attendant.
project. We can do that.
Yeah, that's a side project for Grindr, right?
So
yeah, I think it's.
You said a lot of $50 words there. What
Yeah.
what would I do if your message is compelling? When I call my insurance provider, what do I ask them
Well,
to get this service or product?
you would, and life insurance people, depending on how they structure it, it's all important to have somebody that's independent life insurance so they have access to different carriers, because it's only a handful of carriers that really have best in class coverage and the way you get paid out. And there's two ways to get paid out on long-term care. One is reimbursement, meaning you've paid the bill and you're asking for reimbursement. The other is indemnity, where you're just actually calling for the money. And so again, back to wealthy families, they will access this because they're doing an arbitrage where they're thinking, okay, well, it's cheap for me to offset. If it costs me $12,000 a year to have this $1 million policy that gives me $12,000 a month at some point in the future, good trade,
Yeah.
right? So that's a great transfer of risk.
Right.
And that's one of the things that I've been focused on. So,
Why would,
and of course you could always call me
yeah.
to help, but I mean,
Call you what?
you can call me a lot of things, but if you needed help with insurance, it's one of
Oh,
them.
okay, thanks.
So why would somebody with that much money need insurance? I guess what you're describing
right.
here is it's not really, they're not really using it as insurance. They're using it as a way of shifting the risk to, so
Because they don't want all
And
that
they
money
do
in the
that,
stock
and they do
market.
that in a lot of stuff. They do that in a lot of different things.
yeah. Gotcha. And so
Like
that's,
if you buy stock options and you arbitrage the stock, so the stock has up and down, you can buy puts and calls and collar around the, so if it moves one way or another, you still get paid.
yeah.
It's a way to protect that investment. So for people that have a lot of stock options that can't sell them or access them, they try to also protect if the stock moves, if that's possible, depending on if they actually own the option and it's outside of a qualified plan and stuff like that. But another way you can use risk transfer is to, if you're a farmer and you have a crop, you may buy crop insurance against hailstorm or windstorms that destroy the crop. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah, and we talked about options trading on the podcast before for our listeners. So maybe we need to dive more into that.
You guys are smart.
But,
You're smart.
well, we have
Got you
guests on
fooled.
for that. That's for sure, because we could. I remember options training and taking phone calls when I was.
That was always the most
trader.
stressful call.
And yeah, those were
They're
always
totally stressed. I
I
totally
don't
agree
know
with
if I'm
you.
going to say this right. I would always get my diagram out for puts and calls, and what's
Side of
what's
the
up, and what's
transaction
down,
account.
and buying and selling, and all that.
You're not the only one. No, it's the same. It's the same. It's totally stressful, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, when I kind of think about this, I'm kind of trying to bring it down to the personal level for those
Sure.
of us who don't have millions of dollars that we're looking to protect. But we all do this kind of on a somewhat regular basis ourselves, right? We go to this grocery store because we know that they sell this at a lower price, or we go get gas here because we know it's a better grade, and we do this kind of arbitrage or risk pushing risk around for ourselves at oftentimes a much more personal and dollar level. But we do this because we want to protect our own livelihood, right? We
That's
can't
right.
all just say, "Oh, I'm going to blow all my money this week on, what I'm going to drop $7,000 on brunch this month." Well, no, we can't. We although that would be a fabulous brunch and everybody would absolutely love us, we'd be broke the rest of the month and we would hate our lives, right? That we all have to deal with kind of how we manage the risk of our own financial situation. And what you're saying is that for many of these families, it's managing that risk at
At a
family
much bigger level. At a much bigger level, right? Because, we would sit there and meet with client families and talk about their cash flow. If we were paying their bills and we were trying to manage their expenses, as part of their investment portfolio and whatever their income was, and versus what their spend rate is, and they would say, well, we thought we budgeted, $35,000 a month, and we'd say, well, you are spending $35,000 a month on your Amex, but you also have another $25,000 in additional expenses. So you're really at a $60,000 or $70,000 a month spend. And they would go, oh, okay, no big deal. And then we'd show them charts how it would be draining their wealth. And they were going, okay, well, I don't understand what this means if it's a zero over here. And it was like, well, that's if you keep it this rate, you will have nothing left. Right. So, and you're thinking to yourself, well, this can't happen to wealthy people. But some people, I think the trappings of wealth can, no different than any of us, you can get easily caught up, and I got to have that brand new car. I got to only just now think about it in a much bigger way.
Yeah.
You know, I've got the
Lifestyle-
yacht, I've got
lifestyle
the
creep
jet.
to the max.
Mm-hmm.
I think
And so
you know,
it's
sorry, go ahead.
no, I think it's why you look at somebody like a Warren Buffett, who's rich, one of the richest men in the world, right? And he drives his like 2008 Cadillac or something. I mean, man could buy Cadillac, right? The car company or something, and but he doesn't care.
Yeah.
Like it's a nice car. He says, "This is a good car. I really like this car."
Yeah.
And I think
as
that's kind of old money. Like they don't. It's
Whisper
fine.
wealthy, they call it, right?
Yeah, I don't have to. I'm not out to impress anybody.
To anybody. So David and I were talking about this earlier today. You know,
Yeah.
we were talking about celebrities, and I think we all sort of there's a celebrity obsession, especially in the LGBT community.
Big
But
time.
we all think like they're all fabulous. Like we all just got to see like the architectural digest of RuPaul's home, and we think that's just how everybody, all celebrities get to live. But it was like not even 3 or 4 weeks after the writer's strike, and Billy Porter's out there saying, "I'm going to be homeless soon," and you think to yourself, here
How's
you've
that
got
possible?
all these awards, and you're like in all these movies and Broadway plays, and you're set. You have no risk or concern to be worried about. Yet, we're all supposed to have like 3 to 6 months worth of emergency savings tucked aside in case we're unemployed for a spell. And he's not even 3 months out, and he's like, I'm going to lose my house.
Right.
So I think this is something that we need to start talking about. Is even the people that we think have arrived are still trying
Or
to
have it all.
or have it all. They're all. Their shoes have just gotten better, and their costs of their brunches have gotten more expensive, and their cars have gotten more expensive.
Yes.
But they haven't become immune to a lifestyle creep.
Right. I think there are families that are really blessed with a huge cash flow from an operating company, or somehow they've structured wealth that has been accumulated and they have a distribution that's consistent, but it's typically professionally managed somewhere and they're managing it at a level, right? And the principal's still there, and so they're okay. There are some that actually can access that, or they can actually spend through it. I think Hollywood is probably one of the worst in the sense of who really has money and who doesn't, right? Of the celebrities. And you probably, like, I think Elton John is probably one of the most wealthy singer-songwriters, but he's been doing it for so long, and I think he owns still all of his rights. And so he has created enormous wealth, but he's also created huge charitable organizations. Yeah. So we want to really acknowledge the people and the families that have done great things. I think George Clooney, made a very good living in acting and stuff, but when he created his tequila company and sold it for a couple billion, I think it was $2 or $3 billion or something.
Yeah.
Okay, that's called a liquidity event, and that's life-changing. Even if you've already got money, you got a lot more money, right?
Yeah.
He's got that beautiful Italian villa.
I mean, he's gay, really. That's what I keep telling myself.
Mauls his beard? I didn't know that.
When we watched ER back in the day, we all
yeah.
thought
Oh
that.
my God, we all
We
right.
didn't think it though when he
I
was
watched him
on
on the Facts of Life and thought he was hot.
Yeah, no, I didn't.
But I think that's a good example where the celebrity wealth is, maybe when you see it on the red carpet, it's designed to look that way. It's designed to look successful. Whereas if you're on the red carpet, one of my good friends in LA used to say, I was involved at the Kennedy Center for years on the National Symphony Orchestra trustee. And it was very cool. We got to go to the red carpet events, for the Kennedy Center honors and stuff. And he used to joke, he'd go, baby, the difference between being on the red carpet in LA and being in the carpet in Washington, D.C. is, baby, the jewels are real in D.C. and they own them.
Yeah,
Right.
They're not borrowed. They're not fake.
Yeah, exactly.
You did bring up an interesting point, and I think that for those of us who may have a jealous streak, or sometimes look at these families or these people with lots and lots of money, and we get angry because of the assumptions that we make about how they made their money. You talked about this whole idea of not having kids who are entitled, and I think about the statistic that we have seen now, I think for 3 or 4 years in a row, that roughly between 47 and 50% of parents are still paying for some aspect of their
Yeah.
adult kids' lives, right? And
Yeah.
for people who are over the age of 35, it's 11% of those people have mom and dad still paying for something like their cell phone or their mortgage or their rent or their car insurance or whatever. Um, it almost seems like, well, it's not really any different. There's just more zeros added to the end, right? We have all these, and I'm not saying that every kid who gets help from their parents is entitled, but when you're taking money from mom and dad, and that money could actually be more useful for mom and dad because mom and dad need to save money for retirement, and you're taking it from them, and you are still enjoying a lifestyle that maybe your parents don't have, then you are creating entitled kids, right? And is that
That's right.
is that what you're
That's right.
talking about with these
Yeah.
ultra high net worth individuals, where they have kids who we make these assumptions, right? That Paris Hilton never worked, right? She's just got all the money, so she never really worked that hard. She's one of the hardest working people in that industry. But we make all these assumptions. How do we, give us some examples of stuff like that? How does that get managed out that your kids aren't entitled and
How
excellent?
do you
at
avoid
it?
that? How do we try and avoid that work?
Yeah.
Families have to create structures. They have to create, there's the way we look at families. There's the 5 capitals. My good friend and mentor, James E. Hughes, a well-known trust and estate attorney who is probably one of the gurus in family wealth and helping families. He's written quite a few books, in one on family wealth, another that was his first, another one called Families, a Compact Amongst Generations, Flourishing Families, a Compact Amongst Generations. Jay would talk about the 5 capitals of the family, and I think it helps all of us think about the way families combined. So we have the human capital, the people. We have the intellectual capital, their capacity to think. Not everybody's.
Everybody has that one.
3 is the social capital, really what's the money about, what we're going to do as a family. 4 is the spiritual capital. What are our values? What do we think about? And 5 is really the financial capital. Everybody thinks that the financial capital is going to pull it up. Well, the reality is you want to flip it, and that these items, these other 4 capitals, are really need to be developed with the support of the financial capital that you have as a family. Every family should do this, by the way, not just really wealthy families. But with really wealthy families, we have to formalize it. And if you think about it, it's kind of like a company, right? You're not going to build a company without the people and the ability of your people to think. And what are the values of this company? And what are we going to do as good citizens as a company? Well, the family, we need to think about that as well. And how do we help our kids in a family like that self-actualize? Well, they need to understand what our family's about. They need to understand our values. Excuse me. I think they need to understand our values. They need to understand what we are nurturing when we ask you to go to college, or how you're going to accelerate your brain and learn and become top of the way to think. So that intellectual development and the human development becomes important. That's self-actualization, right? Whereas if you give a kid $1 million at 18 and say, God bless, what do you think is going to happen?
This is so funny you asked that question. I remember when I was working at the first mutual fund company that I have worked at, there was a trust that you could sign up your kids up for and invest into this one fund. It was called the Gift Trust, and families would give this, basically they would invest this money on behalf of their kids so that their kids could then take the money out when they reached a specific age, and you could pick any age. But I remember reading that they would always have, there was always a spot for a message that you could leave the kid. And one time I was looking at one of the accounts, and the message says, "Don't piss it all away on a Porsche." And I think that's what you're kind of talking about here. Yeah. You can hand them this big chunk of money, and what good can they do with it, not only for themselves, but for maybe other people and the globe in general? Or are they just going to be selfish little with that money?
I have a good friend of mine. She's developed an entire learning platform because she as a leading consultant to families, and she's realizing that the families just don't, the rising gen in particular, don't really know enough. They don't understand all of the structure. They don't understand money. They don't understand, how things are built, what their responsibility is if you're a beneficiary of a trust, or you have a trustee role, or any of these more sophisticated ways that we've created the transfer of wealth. And so, just like you're talking every day to help people understand what it means to be out of debt. And debt can be good. Like, there's certain things that we use debt for that's very important. And if you have short-term goals with debt, that's fine. But it's also, what does that mean? What does it mean to have a checking account? What does it mean to have a savings account? I know it sounds very old school, but I do think that helps to create knowledge and understanding and appreciation. Did you have a piggy bank as a kid?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
See, that was a really good training tool from a family perspective.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of the tools. We just don't. We have to magnify them or put them in a place where we can help the families that have, more than they ever thought they'd have. Most people don't think they'd ever have this. It's an unlikely event. Like, statistically, it's impossible to think you're going to have $1 billion.
Right.
So they're as
But-
surprised as the rest of us are.
Well, a lot of people, especially if it's first generation, they don't know what to do. They don't know how to deal. We watch it. We've all seen it. They very flashy or whatever.
Right. Especially
Whereas-
at White House dinners.
Oh, Yep, it's a good example. So I think if you think about what families do to position themselves for success if they have a lot of money, is they think long term. They understand when to accept risk and when to transfer it. They are willing to address the softer issues that surround their wealth rather than avoid it, because it'll come back and bite them. Now,
When you say softer, what do you mean?
like the stuff we're talking about, the entitlement,
Mm-hmm.
how do the families communicate? And I think you and I could actually have a whole separate conversation about this ability for the family to recognize that quieter voice, maybe the gay person in their family that they think is sort of the black sheep, and they're actually the rainbow sheep. And, we actually have a voice, and there actually could be really good things that come out of that person. Or maybe they're an artist in a family of financial people. Sometimes you got to hear that voice at the table. We need all voices from the family to sit at the table. We need to invite them there. We invite them to speak, but then everybody has to listen.
And so do you act as, in that kind of environment, are you sort of the mediator
Yeah.
in that?
Facilitator.
If you're able to help ultra high net worth families raise unentitled children, how can we apply that to the LGBTQ plus community to help them to think more long term about the finances? We're asking them to do sort of a shift of mind of natural mindset.
Mhm.
So how can we say, quit the hyperbolic discounting? You need to think long term, because you're not going to want to. You and your partner are not going to want to be separated when you're in your 70s or 80s to go into separate nursing homes. Like, how can we get the community to? How can you change the psychology for the community if you can change the psychology for people who would otherwise grow up to be brats?
Do you think it would be, I like the idea of helping people think about this old man that exists, and that they're going to have needs, and they're going to have things that they have to do. They can't go work because they're too old to go work, or they don't have the energy. So they're going to live on what they have, and they're going to want to hang out with their friends. They're going to want to still do fun things. And that person is me 30 years from now, or 20 years from now, or whatever, whoever we're talking to get them to think that. You're never too old to create financial planning. You may not have as much, but there's ability for people to think that way. So I like to kind of have people visualize this old person that they're talking to and taking from. You're borrowing from that old person. We've all done it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We should create an app using AI that makes somebody look older than they are, so what they would look like 20, 30 years in the future, and have that app sort of talk to them and say, these are what I want, this is how I want to live my life. These are the risks and concerns I have. So you, 20 or 30 years younger, help me live the life I want.
Future self. Yeah, it's kind of like, I like to say this when we talk about our spending our money, that we have to pay our future self first, our past self second, paying for things that we already bought, and then our present self third. And that way we actually have the money for the future. Whereas the vast majority of people do it in just the opposite order. They pay their present self first. If they then have any money, then they may pay their past self by paying their debts down. And then if they're lucky enough or are paying attention, they do have a little bit of money to set aside for their past, their future self. And that's the part of the reason why we see so many people who don't have any money set aside for retirement, is because they have been paying themselves in the wrong order.
It's a financial plan. You're talking about having a financial plan.
Yeah.
And as a CFP or financial planner, it's important that we all have a financial plan. And it doesn't mean you have to always, I mean, you're not always going to follow it. There's going to be times when you deviate, but that's when you look at it and go, okay, we deviated from this. How are we going to make it up? Or what are we going to do to compensate? And I also think that we're going to work longer than any other generation, because I think we're younger than we are. We live, how do I say this? I think we're living longer lives. We are younger as older people than our grandparents were. And therefore, I see people that are working later in life, longer in life, are more productive. Mm-hmm. My dad's still the chairman of our family business. It keeps him very young. I think he gets tired, but I also think that he can do more in probably 2 or 3 hours than anybody else, in the business, because he's been there for 60 years. So it's very interesting to watch people as they get into their 70s and 80s still working. They're very hip, texting, and I just think that there's some good things about this. But having the financial freedom or independence is really powerful. And I really appreciate all that you guys do with that. And if I can ever help with that, because I truly think that that's what we, as a gay community, if we're empowered financially, it's going to make all the difference. And there are a lot of families who are very charitable. A lot of gay people, as you know, are very charitable. We do a lot of fundraiser participation. We participate in Equality Illinois, which is a big support for the equality in Illinois, but our Equality Illinois is one of the biggest in the country. And so we've been supporting Florida. We've been collaborating with Texas, which are really having lots of problems, right?
Yeah, right.
And then the fundraisers for like Chicago House, which is one of the first organizations in the country that dealt with HIV, and they've continued to deal with it, but also have expanded their services to now like helping homeless gay youth. Mm-hmm. There's really a need that we get gay people to think beyond themselves. I'm involved with this project called the Legacy Project, which is to really support from the Horizons Foundation out of San Francisco. They're supporting the 200 plus charitable organizations that serve the gay community. And our role on the other side is to really help get advisors to be more educated and more willing to talk about with their clients, gay clients, LGBTQ plus, you guys. So I'm not offending anybody. I'm just simplifying it. Gay in the broader sense of the world of our community. And that is that we get them to think in legacy giving, people that have money to give legacy. So that helps people think, okay, maybe I want to create a legacy. Maybe that means I want to create and save more or direct this differently than what I've been doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely. This is why we're trying to create 1 million LGBTQ plus millionaires, for this very reason. We can all, you have enough money to cover you through retirement and beyond. And the beyond is the generation that's coming after us, so that they can start out life with $20,000 to $20 million, and then that can continue to grow and grow. So with that in mind, with all your experience dealing with high net worth families, what 2 or 3 pieces of advice do you have for our listeners to help them someday reach that ultra high net worth level?
To help them reach it, think long term, manage risk, know when to transfer it, when to keep it, how to mitigate that.
Know when to hold them and know when to fold them.
Love that. I think you know, you want to understand our relationship with money. There's an interesting dynamic there. And I've had a podcast on it with one of my friends that trains on it with really wealthy families, like talks about, you know, how we react with money is interesting, how we own our own internal thought
Money
process about
stories.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I like that. I think that's very interesting. And I think from the gay community standpoint, what are we going to do that's going to make us happy? How are we going to find that? I think in order to experience joy in our lives, we have to focus that when it's joyful, and it isn't about money, it's different. And then how do we bring joy to others? Because I think that really brings more contentment back into us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I think it's very easy for us to get trapped in the idea of joy is, or happiness is in the here and now, right? It's being able to go to brunch. It's being able to go to the bar and watch Drag Race. It's being able to go and drop $500 on that bag or those shoes that we want. And all of those are kind of the temporary here and now things that we need to have some fun in our lives. We need to have some enjoyment in our lives. But are those the things that really deeply make us happy? And we need to ask what truly does bring that deep level of happiness. John and I have talked about this with the return on happiness. The way we spend our money, it can give us a return on happiness. If it's momentary happiness, we're going to be spending our money for the rest of our lives to get that momentary happiness. You know, it's like chasing the dragon. It's getting that next bump of happiness by spending. Or do we have a structure in our lives that allows us to spend our money in a way that gives us happiness so that we don't have to constantly be spending, or it's spending on things that doesn't just benefit us, but like you said, help other people as well.
Yeah, I think those are really part of the key key elements to living a successful life. And I think families of wealth are also seeking that. That's why I talk about it. That you know, all of the trappings of wealth don't bring happiness. It's ephemeral, as you just said. That's a $50 word. I know you guys are like, wow. But
Sounds $100 to me.
okay, 100. But the concept is it's just fleeting, right? It's just it's going to bring a moment of happiness. Now, if you saved for those shoes, you saved, you know, for 7 months to buy those Ferragamos, and you're going to keep them for 12 years.
Yeah.
That's a different level,
Different story,
right?
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm a car guy. I love cars. Love really cool cars, and I like to keep them really clean and really nice. And then, you know, people go, "How old is this car?" And I'm like, "Well, it's a 2008." And they're like, "No way!" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, we just kept it in good shape because, you know, and they last. Certain cars will last. Most cars will last long term if you take care of them. But you know what I mean? So I think the appreciation of what we do have is part of that satisfaction or gratification. You know, my husband has a whole process he does every day. He writes he does the gratitude journal. So he writes every day the 3 things that he's grateful for. And that's how he starts the day. And I find that if I'm feeling down or frustrated, I start doing that and it just lifts you up.
Well, because you see yourself at number 1 every single day, right? He's grateful that he has you in his life.
I don't look at the list.
I'm just kidding.
Because you know,
David's been
probably
looking at
not
my
what
list.
he's looking at my list.
Keep your eyes on your own worksheet, David.
Let me see your list. No.
Yeah, right.
So people might not know, but you have a podcast. What is it? What's it about? Who listens to it?
Well,
How can our people find it?
it's called the Rainbow Bull, and it was really designed around how do we create a voice in the wealth community. And the concept was, a friend of mine said to me, you know, you've worked with these super wealthy families. What is it? And she was like, we've done well ourselves, but how can we learn from that? You know, she used to produce a big reality TV company, and she's like, I think you'd be great to do a podcast. Why don't you do it? And so it's really the secrets that we've learned, both myself and the guests we have on the show, working with really wealthy families that we can all learn from. And our target audience is our LGBTQ community and our allies, because I didn't know how else to say no rednecks and no difficult people, people that hate gays don't join. But I find it to be, kind of a cool thing because we talk about a broad array of topics. And it's interesting because some of them get suggested, and I reach out to my community, my network, and they come on the show. And we just finished one right now where we recorded on dating. Like, what happens when you're dating someone that has a lot of money? Or what if you have a lot of money and you want to go into the dating market? We all know, that there's sort of three rituals. Like, the dating sort of the way to start as it starts to get more serious. And then when it's really serious, you want to get married. What are the things we should think about? And how do you avoid this inequality in the relationship being the disruption in the relationship? Because it's a problem. And in the gay world, we have a lot of, disparity sometimes in the relationships.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of been a fun thing to explore. And you can, the Rainbow Bowl is available on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, and my website, www.tvolkco.com, has links to it. And what else should I tell you? How to get a hold of me? I don't know.
Well, the last question I have, we didn't send this to you in advance, but it just came to my mind as you were talking about your show is, do ultra high net worth people make prospective dates? Like you're just going on your first date or two or three. Mm-hmm. Do they make them sign NDAs?
Well, I don't know anybody that does that, because I don't think that's the way to, but it goes to another point, which I think you're getting to, is when do you discuss it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a lot of people go out of their way to hide it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
But, they just, because nobody wants to be loved for their money.
Right.
You want somebody to like you or love you because of who you are. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's one of the big issues that this generation is having. And so, you meet people that all of a sudden they're able to go do anything, anywhere. And you're like, okay, how's that possible? And so things start to not, 1 + 1 is 4. And you're like, But I do think it's a real challenge for people that want to find true, authentic relationships and friendships, that the people that have a lot of money struggle with that. It doesn't sound like it would be, but so many of them are what I would call hanger-ons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't have that problem. But I think that
our dog has that problem once in a while, but this is a whole different topic.
I do think it's funny, though, or very interesting that you say this. Nobody wants to be loved for their money. At the same time, at the other end of the spectrum, nobody wants to be rejected for their financial situation, right? If you have a lot of debt or whatever the case may be, many of us will then put on those facades, put on the drag of having money so that people like us, because they don't want people to truly know that how much money you don't have or how much debt you have. It's interesting that can happen at the other end of the spectrum when you do have a lot of money, that you're very cautious about that, or telling people what you have if they don't know.
We're all doing this balancing act to try to figure out where the Goldilocks
Well,
space is.
Don't you think it's part of our insecurity, and it's not unusual for gay men? I mean, I'm only gonna speak for gay men because I'm not a gay woman, but
are you gay?
Or a lesbian? Yeah, big Mo,
I did not know that.
big G, big A, big Y, Mo. So I think the thing that I can relate to is the insecurity of, like, when you would walk into a bar or you go somewhere, you want people to think, oh gosh, he's very successful, and they're going to want to talk to me. What happens, though, I think, is it's the opposite effect on others, because they're like, oh, he's pretentious, or
Yeah.
I think maybe the younger generation is doing a better job of authenticity, but I do think that there's this challenge we have where there's this false image that we're trying to project that masks our insecurity.
Yeah. Mike Ottamelli is a friend and colleague of ours. And I'm going to bastardize it, but he basically says that anytime gay men specifically walk into a room with other gay men, we're constantly figuring out where we are in the pecking order.
Right.
Of, okay, that guy has more money than me. He has more, designer clothing on than I do. His arms are more muscular than mine. So we're constantly figuring out where we are in that pecking order, and then we got to figure out what we can do to make sure that we creep up by the end of the day or the night. So we're constantly
funnier?
dealing with
So we're not part of the
insecurities.
sidewalk sale, right? At
Right.
the end of the
That's right.
night, where the guy is standing there hoping someone else will take us home.
Well, yeah, and I think it just goes to that whole conversation on our self-worth and being authentic and that we're human and that we're human and so we're flawed. And but it's taken years of therapy to figure all this out, you know? And I think it's interesting for me personally, because in my head, I always had this image that I wanted to be better, stronger, faster, richer, more muscled. And as you start to accomplish some of that, it doesn't serve you as anymore. Or as you get older, the motivate, maybe it was highly motivating to me as a younger person, but as you get older, you kind of like, okay, this is empty. And how do I look at myself in the mirror and go, I'm good today. I'm fine. I'm okay. There's always going to be somebody more muscle. There's always going to be somebody richer. There's always going to be, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's a really hard thing to say, it's okay. I'm who I am. Don't you think? Particularly for gay men?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, from my discussions with other people, I think it's hard for humans in general, but I think especially for gay men, because I think, we were brought into this world where it wasn't necessarily designed for us, and
right.
we get lots of messages that's not for us. And that's one of the things I think concerns David and me most about the national dialogue that we're having today, with all these politicians and religious fascists telling us, that we're not worthy to be here, and that, I just wonder what's happening. I feel like, growing up with Anita Bryant and Jerry Falwell and all that, I'm just thinking for a period of time, I kind of thought we were beyond that. And now it's like, we're kind of right back there. And so all these kids are growing up LGBT, and they're going to have the same challenges that we had.
Yeah. I think this topic of inclusion, and I think we were talking offline before we started, was one of my passions right now is to talk about inclusion and how to get us to think about how do we help find our common ground. What is it that helps us come together? Because it's natural for the hate groups to separate us. If if you're gay or you're black or you're Jewish or whatever the distinguishing hate group is, there's probably a lot more in common that we have with each other than we do that are different. And how can we have that conversation?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the whole focus or the whole purpose of those groups is to break us down into smaller groups, because it's a lot easier. It's the whole divide and conquer, right?
Yeah.
If trans people are fighting against lesbians and gays are fighting against non-binary, that's exactly what they want us all to be fighting against each other. And as soon as we're fighting against each other, they can sit back and say, you guys destroy yourselves, right? And that's
right.
Then they win even faster. And so we as a community need to stick together.
One of my good friends, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was going to say that one of my good friends, I was going to give you a cool story about one of my good friends works in philanthropy in Texas. He's West Texas, got a great draw, gay. And he has 12 families that he works with that are super rich. And one of the families he tells a story about, one of the things he was doing is bringing families together is to bring their best friend to dinner, because the families have there's 3 or 4 generations that they're trying to bring together and they don't see eye to eye. Their philanthropy is a big part. A lot of families have a foundation, for example. So he did this exercise and people brought their best friends to dinner. Well, one of the grandsons brought his best friend who's transgendered, and she became very close and sat next to his grandmother, and they hit it off because they love to cook and bake. So grandma gets up from the table, drives to her house, comes back with recipes to share with his best friend, and says to the grandson, if these are the kinds of friends you have in your life, I need to meet them all.
Nice.
And then it prompted the grandson to come out the next couple days or so. I was so touched by the story that these are conservative country families, but I believe that there are some of the salt of the earth. And if we can get them to speak out about these types of things, we will transform. We will come back.
Yeah.
We are going to create a much more inclusive world.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I feel like we could talk for hours, but we're charged by the minute for productions.
Yeah. Sorry.
So thank you very much for coming on the show. We'll definitely have to have
Oh
you
my
back.
God. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I think this was very helpful, and hopefully a lot of our listeners can glean some information that they can apply to their own lives and improve their own net worth. So thank you.
Definitely. Thank you guys very much. Namaste. Appreciate it.
The mission of Queer Money is to financially empower the LGBTQ plus community. Join us in thanking Capital One for supporting that mission. Thank you, Tim, for a fun and insightful interview. We're sure our audience will glean a ton of value from what we discussed and will be able to apply it to their own lives. To you, our listeners and viewers, thank you for joining us for another episode. This week's newsletter includes your Queer Money takeaway and resources that we mentioned in this episode.
Then join us this Thursday when we cover another bonus episode, and next Tuesday when we interview the founder and CEO of Lee Cookies, Nicholas Niclario, about how he used trauma from his childhood to launch his wildly successful and healthy cookie company. Thank you and have a great week.
Cookies.